Welcome to this 360 special, the Stephen Colbert interview. He's been a familiar face in comedy, of course, for more than a decade, starting off in improv, then becoming a regular correspondent on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Then came The Colbert Report, a satirical nightly talk show where he played the role of an ultra-conservative host. In 2015, Stephen Colbert inherited the coveted late-night spot on CBS, where David Letterman had reigned for more than 20 years. All eyes and pressure were on Colbert as he stopped playing a character and started being himself. After the 2016 election, Stephen Colbert really hit his stride as his show tried to make sense of the often nonsensical world of politics. The audience has responded, and Stephen Colbert is now #1 in late-night television. There's a lot, though, you probably don't know about Stephen Colbert, his life, and what he's been through. He is as intellectual and interesting as he is funny. Over the next hour, you'll hear our in-depth interview, where Stephen opens up about his life, his losses, his comedy, and his faith. So there's a bunch I want to talk to you about. And
here come the gotchas.
Yes, exactly.
Here come the mainstream
I have this document
media
here.
gotcha questions. Yeah.
Let me just ask you about stuff that was in the news. Ken Cuccinelli.
Oh, my God. I blame you for Ken Cuccinelli.
He was on CNN.
A lot.
Yes, I know.
A lot.
I know.
I didn't watch much when he was on. Because there's a certain, I love your show. Every night I come home, my wife and I have a glass of wine, handful of nuts, watch Law Anderson, go to bed. That's it. That's how I end my day.
A handful of nuts?
A handful of nuts, just not a little bit.
Sure.
I got to stay in the suit. I can't come home and binge out.
Right.
And there are a few panelists that I can't.
Yes.
I got to skip over. I got to skip over some of the. Cuccinelli would be one of them.
If any other person in an administration, in a prior administration, had rewritten the words of Emma Lazarus's poem, which presidents from time immemorial have quoted with great reverence, it would be an outrage. It would be, people's heads would explode, understandably, because it is a fundamental bedrock marker of who we are.
Yes, there's our physical constitution, and then there's our physical Bill of Rights, and certainly there's the physical Declaration of Independence, but there's also this emotional constitution that America has. There's an emotional reality that we all share that makes us all Americans, and one of them is things like the New Colossus, the poem that Emma Lazarus wrote. It's on the Statue of Liberty, and we're constantly being told by this administration, you don't see what you see, you don't hear what you hear. Now they're saying you don't feel what you feel. You don't actually feel that. And you don't actually believe that this is a nation of immigrants.
You called President Trump, I think, a heretic
to reality.
To reality.
Heretic to reality. As a raised a Catholic, the greatest sin is actually heresy. Because not only do you not only are you astray from the right path, you're encouraging other people to come with you on that path. Specifically, heresy is like proselytizing for the devil.
And the punishment for heretics is sort of the most extreme.
I think it's red-hot iron coffins in Dante's Inferno. The area, I think it's called Dis. I think that's the part of the level of hell that they're in. So it's pretty bad. And
doesn't get much worse than red-hot iron coffin.
Yeah, the worst spa treatment.
Yeah.
And our president, wants to live in a fantasy world where only the way he perceives the world is the way it is, and only things that sort of serve his vision. And he's also trying to convince us that that is the only world that exists. It's extremely solipsistic. But he's also trying to invite us into this madness that he has. And that's heresy against reality. That is proselytizing for the most selfish and the basest instincts that the American people, like all people, have. But he is not appealing to the better angels of our nature.
I've heard you say that the thesis of your show has become essentially, hey, you're not crazy.
Right.
That's the thesis.
The audience is not crazy. How you feel is actually how you feel. How you think is actually how you think. What you see is actually happening. What you hear is actually what he said.
And I do think that's part of the appeal. I mean, with news and what we do every night, people at a certain point get exhausted.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How do you do it every night? Because I have the relief of doing jokes.
Right.
And I'm not taking anything away from the ridiculous.
But still,
please understand that.
But still,
ouch.
Yes.
You had the ridiculous. I had the absurdo chart.
but still,
how do you keep going?
Well, I mean, even though you're in comedy, though, you are still doing the same pace that we are in news.
Right.
In fact,
we do 5 nights a week.
Right.
An hour a night, which is what you do, right?
And whatever, in comedy, normally people spend all day, or in some cases, if they only have one show a week, all week writing the material and thinking it and honing it. You have to change stuff 15 minutes before air, 5 minutes before air.
Right. We have an idea of what the show is going to be, in the morning after we do the pitch meeting, actually in this room. We have some sense of like what the things that people are talking about, because we want to talk about what people are talking about. I'm not here to educate the audience. I'm here to give us our opinion. It's like a long editorial is what it is. And but that can all be thrown out the window, even though we have a plan starting at 10:30 in the morning. We have a general plan.
Right.
Many's the time, as you know. Yes. And it's only accelerating.
Right. It also feels
at
like
4:30.
Yes.
And when I go on at 5:30, right. 4:40, 4:45, 5 o'clock. Someone might pop in their head and go chopper talk.
Chopper talk?
Chopper talk. The president is standing in front of Marine One. We call it chopper talk.
Got it. Okay. Yes.
He should just stand in front of a margarita maker, because it's just the same noise.
Well, yeah.
And at least there'll be a cocktail at the end of it.
I don't hear you. You got to talk. You see that? You have a helicopter.
Oh, really? That's a helicopter? I thought that was the sound of your presidency going down the toilet. I wasn't sure.
But the pace of it, I do think, I think about the people who work in the White House. I think President Trump, Dorothy Parker said those born to the storm find the calm very boring. And I don't know why he was born to the storm, but emotionally, I think that chaos is something he's completely used to.
He creates his own storm.
And has lived his whole life in.
He creates his own storm. He takes a big bucket of seawater, throws it in his own face, and goes, "I'm a sea captain. Right, we're going to ride it out, boys." Throw another bucket. He wants
But
that.
I always think about everybody around him, just how exhausting it must be to be in that orbit.
Well,
they choose to do
every
it.
Person, every person who leaves goes, "God, it was crazy in there."
Right. Rick Wilson, a Republican strategist who we have on the show, wrote a book called "Everything Trump Touches Dies."
Yes.
And I actually think, I think that's a really interesting title. It sort of reminds me of Rogue and X-Men. Everything she touches sucks the life's blood out of you, or whatever it was, and kills you. Do you ever worry about that? Because the thing about Rogue is it's not just people that she kissed who die; it's people who go against her. And there are many people who have already destroyed themselves because they've so gone after Trump that they themselves, it blows back on. They've gone down to his level. And
I'm not going against him. I am not the resistance. I said this, I think, the first night after he was elected. I think it was the next day, because there were the next day, a little too late, there were marches in all the streets. People were like, "Wait, no, we care." A day after it mattered. And I think what I said at the top of the monologue is I just want to this is not the resistance. This is alternative programming, because I could foresee the madness and the heartbreak associated with that guy being in a very important moral position. And so what we want to do is to point and laugh at what he thinks is his own unassailable dignity that he thinks he gets from that office. But that's not resisting, that's laughing. And it's not the same thing. I'm not a political figure.
But it is interesting, because the whole notion of people laughing at him is something he has brought up time and time again. I'm sure you've done montages of this. It is a recurring theme for him to say, under Obama, the world was laughing at us. They're not laughing anymore. They're not laughing now. The irony is, they are laughing.
Exactly.
But he says this. You can go back and find a dozen easily references to, the people aren't laughing at us anymore. It is very important to him in his mind that he's not being laughed at, and which is why probably your show, he's described you as, saying filthy things.
Yeah, exactly. That's the most I've been able to get to say about me. Does he tweet about you?
No, surprisingly he has not.
No, I have yet to get him to tweet about me once.
Really?
Yeah, my feelings are a little hurt.
The guy on CBS is what a lowlife. What a lowlife. This guy on CBS has no talent.
Hey, Mr. President, I will not stand here and let you talk that way about James Corden.
One of the things I read that your mom used to say to you as a kid was to, with any hardship you were going through, to view it in the light of eternity.
Yes.
I found it really interesting, and I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days since I read that. How do you think, I won't say eternity, but history is going to view this president?
Poorly.
You have no doubt about that?
Oh, no. No.
Because oftentimes, a president leaves, he's not popular, and then, George W. Bush left with low ratings, I guess you would say, or
Sure.
opinion polls, and now is viewed much more different. At least different.
I question your research on that one. I don't think George W. Bush
He's
is
gone up
actually compared to Trump.
Yes.
Well, sure. Sure. I mean, if our next president is a single-celled organism, then Trump's going to look great. Some sort of slime mold.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I'm all in. Chips are all in on this not being a good one.
There is a belief among some Democrats, and I guess, even maybe a few Republicans who appear on TV, saying that there will reach a point of critical mass where people will have had enough. Do you?
I think it's just we vote in 2020 and we find out some more about our country. We found out something interesting about our country in 2016, and I think what we find out every so often in presidential elections is that there's a large group of Americans, and I don't even think it's necessarily Democrat or Republican. There's a large group of Americans who think the president should be a complete jerk. He shouldn't be somebody that you necessarily admire. It should be like, look, a guy who's willing to work on the dark side and get things done.
Well, I also think there's people who just like the fact that that you're upset about him, and that that we're covering him, and
Sure, I'm familiar with the term "drinking liberals' tears," but but that seems like it's a huge price to pay.
No, but
to get to see guys like
he's
me
a
upset.
tough guy who doesn't take any guff and is not politically correct, and there's an element of people who like that
Right.
they can't be that way in their own life.
Those
and
are
so-
not policy positions.
Those
That's just people who perhaps for real reasons feel like that they have been made to suffer in some way, and then they use him as a tool to inflict suffering on others. So we're all even. It's zero sum.
There is Max Boot wrote about this recently, that there is the president. Conservatives used to make fun of liberals for victimhood, that they were always portraying themselves as victims, according to conservatives.
Yes.
Now, Donald Trump, he is promoting a sense of victimhood that seems appealing to a lot of the people listening to him. That he and they are being discriminated, that he's such a strong Christian, as he told Chris Cuomo once after a debate, that that's why the IRS is auditing him, allegedly. No proof actually offered.
Sure. I agree with you. That is one of the appeals of Donald Trump, is that there are people who feel that strangely feel like they are like him, or that he is like them, when I don't know anyone like him. But he says, you and me are the same, and I am being victimized, therefore I understand your experience. But he's not being victimized, and he's like no one. He's born with a gold spoon in his mouth. And maybe he is like everybody else. I don't know. I suppose people have a commonality.
Yes,
but
the
odd thing about the president is that we actually know nothing about him. We don't know we don't know stupid things. We don't know school grades. We don't know his actual skin color. We don't know what his actual hair is like. We don't know what he's worth. We don't know anything about his conversations with other world leaders. We don't know anything about him. That's the odd part. Except for a guy who likes to always have a camera pointed at him and always talk about himself, there's very little we can say about him with certainty.
On a serious level, does it worry you? Because it worries me about abnormal behavior being normalized, and
of course that was the first worry.
The daily repetition of this stuff, after a while,
again.
Yes.
And when I'm sure the challenge for real news is to fact check him more than twice, because the third fact check sounds like you're being
petty,
a little bitchy.
Right? Yeah. No, that's
you know what
true.
I mean?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
we already went over this.
Right. Would you want to have Trump on your show again?
Can I suggest something?
Yes, go ahead.
How about 2 walls? Okay, each of them
Connected?
No, not connected. 2 walls, one here, one there, in between a moat
And a nice resort.
filled with fire.
Oh, yeah.
The quick answer would be no, because it would be hard for me to be properly respectful of the office because I think that he is so disrespectful of the office that it's very hard to perceive him as I would want to perceive a president in terms of their status and the dignity and the representation of the United States. So I think just for safety's sake, it wouldn't be a good idea.
Obviously all the Democratic candidates are being asked, do they believe Trump is a white nationalist, a white supremacist? How do you answer that question?
A, I'm not running for president. B, he calls himself a nationalist, and he thinks we should have more people from Norway and less people from African countries. So I think it's a fairly simple equation to say that is white nationalism.
I know you had ideas about what the show was going to be before you started. Everybody does.
Kind of. I kind of had an idea, but I didn't really know.
The thing people do not understand about starting a show is it becomes something, whatever you think it's going to be, you don't really know until you actually start.
Mike Tyson said it best. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yes.
And that's what it is.
No, but it's true. And you are doing it without a net in front of and everybody's commenting on it.
Sure.
But
yeah,
it does seem like you found the mission, the thesis. You did that live show on Showtime on election night.
Yeah.
To me, that seemed the turning point. What, in your mind, was it? Or had you already been thinking?
No. That was significant because that was significant in a way as a performer. Because the last 11 minutes or so, something like that, is largely improvised. Or I'm just speaking.
I think we can agree that this has been an absolutely exhausting, bruising election for everyone.
That's right.
And it has come to an ending that I did not imagine. We all now feel the way Rudy Giuliani looks.
What that was I was completely emotionally raw. And I think it's important for the audience to know that you're not lying to them. Or you're not selling them a bill of goods. It doesn't mean like every night's a confession. It just means there's some emotional truth to what you're talking about.
But I also think that, that camera is a little piece of glass, and I think it transmits truth and authenticity. People know who's full of shit and who's not.
Right, and at that moment I had, I just ran out of bullshit. And not that I was trying to bullshit the audience, but it was such a stunning event that, it was not necessarily impossible to me that would happen. We considered it. I just knew that if it happened, that I would have a room full of very upset people, and I didn't really want to engage in a bunch of yuck-em-ups. So I said, well, we'll just improvise if that happens, and that's what we ended up having to do. And that led to an authentic response that I think people responded to. But that's not when I found the show. We'd found the show months before, because when you first start a show, everybody samples, and then people kind of went away. And then we worked our way back to the kind of show that we wanted to do, which was, we're going to talk about what just happened. What is the national conversation? What is our opinion from an emotional point of view? Really, hopefully with some emotional truth, because it is on some level an art, about what everybody's talking about today. My fear was that even though I think we had found it, mostly through the live shows, because that's immediacy leads to, I think, authenticity. Even doing a scene fast, if you're an actor, brings some sort of reality to it. My concern was that no one would ever come back to see if we'd found it. Like, we could have actually found the whole treasure, and nobody was like, there's nothing down that cave. And that night, I think, what made enough of a splash that people went, oh, they're doing something interesting now. That was an expression of something we'd already found. It wasn't the new thing. And then the show basically got people to... It built an audience again between that and Inauguration Day. And by Inauguration Day, people, I think, were hungry for someone talking about what was happening on a daily basis immediately, because the news cycle had happened so fast. Or it had become so fast, because the president is the person that you rightly should pay attention to. It's not like we're indulging some madman. He's the president of the United States. It is right and proper that you pay attention to everything he says, because everything he says has an effect.
You wrote me a letter after my mom died, and in it you said, I hope you find peace in your grief. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is how we don't really talk about grief and loss. People aren't comfortable talking about it. And one of the things I found in the last 2 months since my mom died is people coming up to me on the street or reaching out to me in Instagram or wherever, and sharing their grief and sharing their loss with me. And I found that the most helpful thing. I found it to be the most powerful and moving thing. And I kind of oddly don't want that to stop, because in regular times people don't do that. And you've spoken very publicly about what you experienced as a kid, and a lot of it I didn't know. I think a lot of people don't know. So if you don't mind, I wanted to just talk to you a little bit about it and sort of how it has shaped who you are now. Your dad was killed in a plane crash. You were 10 years old, along with your two brothers, Peter and Paul.
Yes.
And they were the closest brothers to you in age.
Right. It goes Jimmy, Eddie, Mary, Billy, Margot, Tommy, Jay, Lulu, Paul, Peter, Stephen.
You had 11. There were 11 of you.
I'm the youngest of 11. Yeah.
Right. My dad died when I was 10 too, and I think, it's such a horrible age to lose a father. I can't imagine losing both my brothers at the same time as well. For me, losing my dad then, it changed the trajectory of my life. I'm a different person than I feel like I was meant to be. And I feel like there are times I feel like the person, I remember when I was 10, I felt like I marked time. And to this day, I mark time between while my dad was alive and after. It's like the New Year's Zero. It's like when Pol Pot took over Cambodia.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. There's another guy. There's another Steve. There's a Steve Colbert. There's that kid before my father and my brothers died. And it's actually kind of difficult. I have fairly vivid memories from right after they died to the present. Like it's continuous and contiguous, like it's all connected. There's this big break in the cable of my memory at their death. And everything before that has got an odd, ghostly...
To me, it's like shards of glass. Like I feel like
Flashes, little bits of it. And then the things that really... Like music, because they died in September. They died on September 11th. They died on September 11th, 1974. And the music from that summer leading up to it, I will undo me in an instant. The song of the summer was Band on the Run.
Wow.
Do not play Band on the Run around me. Yes. You become a different person. Like I was personally shattered. I was personally shattered, and then you kind of reform yourself in this quiet, grieving world that was created in the house. And my mother had me to take care of, which I think was sort of a gift for her, a sense of purpose at that point, because I was the last child. But I also had her to take care of, and it became a very quiet house and very dark, and ordinary concerns of childhood suddenly kind of disappeared. Right. I became, I won't say mature, because that actually was kind of delayed by the death of my father, by sort of kind of restarting at 10. But I had certainly a different point of view than the children around me.
There's a writer, Mary Gordon, who wrote about fatherless girls, but I think it applies, and my mom used to quote it to me all the time, but I think it applies to boys as well, and I'll paraphrase her, it's a fatherless child thinks all things possible and nothing is safe. And I never really understood it when my mom would say it when I was young, but I've come to understand it.
All things are possible in both the positive and the negative.
Correct, yeah. Great things can happen. The phone can ring and your whole life can change for better or worse. But I became what I refer to jokingly as a catastrophist, because I did not want to be surprised and hurt again, so I started sort of plunging headfirst into the things that scared me most. Like I would take survival courses in the wilderness to know that I could survive and, I
did not have that reaction. I read a lot of science fiction. That was my reaction.
But I have heard you say that you do believe in like pushing toward things you are afraid of. You've talked about standing in an elevator and making it and having an awkward experience intentionally.
That's awkwardness. That's. I suppose there's fear involved in that. But so your dad dies. And your brothers, who were almost as big as your dad, because they're your older brothers, and they hung the moon in your mind. So suddenly this important thing disappears, and important things suddenly lose some of their power. Supposedly important things doesn't mean you love your dad or your brothers any less, but things supposedly have status don't have status anymore. And so being willing to be ridiculous or not worrying what people thought of your status suddenly became easier. And actually the sort of the bits of embarrassment that you might feel about being ridiculous in public, like singing out loud in an elevator full of strangers, which is an awkward and embarrassing thing to do. I would do it on purpose to get that feeling of embarrassment or kind of destruction of personal status, that protective feeling that you have to stay straight and to stay sort of in control or well thought of. And I would purposefully embrace that awkward moment of embarrassment. And it would kind of run through me like an electric little current. And I liked that feeling. I think it has something to do with not thinking that anything is important, including my own embarrassment.
I know you've said
that's related to status somehow.
Right. I know you've said that school suddenly didn't seem important, and if teachers would try to.
No, and I was like I was like a golden child in terms of like my school.
Right.
When I was.
But you
before that happened. After that, I was like, forget it.
You blew off school, but you were reading a book a day at home.
What I wanted to read, though, I was escaping into fantasy and science fiction. Science fiction first, and then fantasy later. When somebody gave me Tolkien.
When you lost your two brothers, your dad and the boys, as I know you refer to them.
It was always Dad and the Boys.
That's how they were called.
Dad and the Boys. Well, Peter and Paul, but Dad and the Boys.
And I know most of your other siblings had already left. They were in college. They had families of their own. So it was really just you and your mom.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah.
That is a difficult thing. My mom, I talked to Howard Stern about this as well. Howard Stern said he always sort of felt like he had to treat his mom like a china cup, like a china teacup. And I always viewed my mom as a space alien who had landed on this planet and whose ship was immobilized, and I had to protect her and show her how to live in this world. And I felt that until the day she died. And now I look back at it and I realize one of my mom's greatest strengths, which as a kid drove me bananas, was how, despite tragedies and losses, she consciously chose to remain open and vulnerable and optimistic and believing the best in like everybody she met. And I felt like, okay, she can do that because I'm, running interference and I'm scheming and plotting and, willing to do
Any chance that she was doing it because you were there and needed a good example?
I don't think she thought in those terms, to be honest. Now, I'm not going to go that far. She wasn't, your mom, I think, was very parental. My mom was more, she was, an amazing creature, but
because my mom was so shattered by the loss, not destroyed, but shattered by the loss, we used to joke that I raised my mom after the age of 10.
Right. I completely
because I was,
understand.
A child in some ways is struck in a different way, but a child's also resilient.
Right.
Their worldview is not fully formed. Now my worldview includes Dad and your brother's dying. That's part of the worldview. I'm not at my age now, which is around the age of my father and my mother were when he died. I'm not sure if I could be as resilient. So I don't entirely know how she did it. I had a friend who lost someone recently, lost a child, and she said, "How did your mother do this?" And I said, "I wish she was here to tell you." But it had to do with love, and it had to do with her for loving God. And I have the crucifix on my wall. That was hers when I inherited it when she died, and she would pray to Our Lady and say, "She knows what it is to lose a child." And her example of her faith stays with me. And that is we're asked to accept the world that God gives us and to accept it with love. If God is everywhere and God is in everything, then the world as it is all just an expression of God and His love. And you have to accept it with gratitude, because what is the option? What is the option?
It's one of the things I have been touched by and sort of healed by the last 2 months is just people having real conversations with me about loss and grief and their pain. And I find it I'm a WASP. We're taught to sort of push all our emotions deep down inside and pretend everything's great. But it's nice to actually kind of relate to somebody on that and talk about something other than this mishigas.
Well, I think when you meet someone who's had a loss, you have two options. One is to say, I'm sorry for your loss, right, which is a perfectly lovely thing to do. But if you can share your experience, then they're not alone.
Well, it's always interesting to me how when I bring it up, meeting somebody for the first time, and they say, "Oh, I'm sorry to bring it up," and as if what they don't realize
forget
is
the person who
I'm
died.
Thinking about it all
Constantly.
the time. I mean,
Exactly.
it is, as you said,
exactly.
It is, it's one of my arms. I mean, it is an extension of who I am.
Quite possibly for the rest of your life.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's been 31 years since my brother died, and more since my dad, and there's not a day that goes by I don't think about
To
it.
the point sometimes where I go like, why is nobody asking me about this? Honest to God, like my brother's died 45 years ago, and sometimes I go like, how come nobody's asking me about Paul? But how would they know to ask? They don't know I'm thinking about him.
Right. And they would be uncomfortable to ask. I actually, this is going to sound weird, but I, for a long time, and probably still to this day, wish that I had a scar. I wish I had like a scar.
Harry Potter.
Yeah, no, like more like a
mean.
Bond villain, like running down my face. That's unavoidable for people to see because it would just be a silent signal to everybody I meet that I'm not the person I was meant to be, or I'm not the person that I started out being.
But you're entirely the person you were meant to be.
I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe this is a warped version of
So there's another timeline with a happier Anderson Cooper?
Yeah. I mean, no. I mean, there's not. It doesn't exist in an alternate universe. But yes, I guess.
I guess that's what I mean about like.
But that's your faith.
My experience.
That is your
my experience, and for example of my mother,
right,
and from what I read and experience of my particular faith, extremely imperfectly, admittedly, is that there isn't another timeline, and this is it. And the bravest thing you can do is to accept with gratitude the world as it is, and then, as Gandalf says, so do all people who are in such times.
You told an interviewer that you have learned to, in your words, love the thing that I most wish had not happened.
I remember.
You went on to say, what punishments of God are not gifts? Do you really believe that?
Yes. It's a gift to exist. It's a gift to exist. And with existence comes suffering. There's no escaping that. And I guess I'm either a Catholic or a Buddhist when I say those things, because I've heard those from both traditions. But I didn't learn it that I was grateful for the thing I most wish hadn't happened, is that I realized it. Mm-hmm. Is that... And it's an oddly guilty feeling.
It doesn't mean you are happy.
I don't want it to have happened. I want it to not have happened.
Right.
But if you are grateful for your life, which I think is a positive thing to do, not everybody is, right, and I'm not always, but it's the most positive thing to do, then you have to be grateful for all of it. You can't pick and choose what you're grateful for. And then, so what do you get from loss? You get awareness of other people's loss.
Well, that's true. Empathy.
Which allows you to connect with that other person.
Right.
Which allows you to love more deeply and to understand what it's like to be a human being, if it's true that all humans suffer.
Right.
And so, at a young age, I suffered something so that by the time I was in serious relationships in my life, with friends, or with my wife, or with my children, is that I have some understanding that everybody is suffering. And however imperfectly, acknowledge their suffering and to connect with them and to love them in a deep way that not only accepts that all of us suffer, but it also then makes you grateful for the fact that you have suffered, so that you can know that about other people. And that's what I mean. It's about the fullness of your humanity. Mm-hmm. What's the point of being here and being human if you can't be the most human you can be? I'm not saying best, because you're going to be a bad person and a most human. I want to be the most human I can be. And that involves acknowledging and ultimately being grateful for the things that I wish didn't happen because they gave me a gift.
Well, one of the things my mom would often say is that she said, I never ask why me, like why did this happen to me? She would always say, why not me? Why would me be exempt from what has befallen everybody, countless others over the centuries? And I think that's another thing that has helped me think, yeah, of course, why not me? This is part of being alive. I mean, this is the suffering is the sadness, suffering. These are all you can't have happiness without having loss and suffering.
And in my tradition, that's the great gift of the sacrifice of Christ, is that God does it too. That you're really not alone. God does it too.
I heard you say something once. I just thought it was funny. You said you were saying that you don't proselytize because something about I'm going to mull it, but it was basically that you don't proselytize. More Jesus for me.
Exactly. I don't really want to proselytize. I don't necessarily want to make anybody from my point of view, more Jesus for me.
But
here at the old heaven buffet, though I don't even have a well-defined enough cosmology to have a sense of what's going to happen. But I want to talk about that gifts of God. What's up? What punishments of God are not gifts? That's actually, I'm quoting Tolkien there. That's not me. That's Tolkien, because in the Tolkien mythos there are elves and men, which are the children of Iluvatar, which is the one god within the Tolkien mythos.
And the elves live forever.
Elves live forever. They are part of the world.
Whom do we know who's an expert on all things Lord of the Rings? Folks, when I spent my entire teenage years reading all of Tolkien, not just The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, I'm talking Farmer Giles of Ham, Smith of Wootton Major, Leaf by Niggle. I knew I was preparing myself for something important. Why else would I ignore all my classwork, abandon sports, and achieve a paleness I have yet to shake off?
Your mom had studied theater, wanted to be an actress.
Yes, she was going to Carnegie.
Was that something that? And she was then in Haiti for reasons I'm not sure which effect.
I think it was Haiti. It was in the Caribbean.
And she got really sick with a tropical disease.
Yeah, like classical, like a rare tropical disease, almost like a cartoon of a disease, and she almost died. And
but in that process of recovery, ended up
my dad
getting
said,
married
"Will you marry me?"
Right.
And instead of having acting career, she started her own theater company, which was 11 children.
And amazing, that's how it was. But did her desire to act, which was then given up to have this family, was that something that you absorbed?
It seems obvious that would be one of my motivators.
Right.
That me, with my mom /
Ward
buddy, in a way, like we became very close friends, that I would do this in some way for her, but it's just self-evident, right? It did not occur to me. Did not occur to me for many years. It really wasn't until she died that I realized a lot of what I did was still going back to making her happy from those early years after Dad and the boys died. Like, we remember distinctly when she laughed for the first time, like it was like a year later or something like that. But that's inside of you as a young person. You absorb that and digest that, but aren't necessarily aware of that until much later. I mean, when my sister Mary said a very interesting thing after Mom died, is that we were all going through this normal grief of my mother's death. And as I said after she died, like, we were so lucky to have her for so long, but how long we had her.
She was 92 when she died.
92, exactly. But it might seem selfish to want more of someone you've known so long, but, it merely amplifies the enormity of the room, whose door is now so quietly shut. Like, you can't ever open that door again. But on top of that, we realized, now we also lost Dad and the boys. In some ways, we were here for her because of her loss of her husband and her children. And when she went, she kind of took them with her, in a way. And so we all, or at least and I know I've talked to a couple of my brothers and sisters about this, but I assume it's a fairly general thing, is kind of re-experience that. And there had been this delayed dealing with all of that over 40 plus years. And I realized in that moment, oh, damn, I wonder if I want to still do comedy, because I kind of was doing this for her without still enjoying it and having all the love and the friendship and the camaraderie of it. But I realized, the seed crystal was
That's interesting.
make her laugh.
Can you love your enemies? Can you love the people you dislike?
You certainly should. You certainly should. I don't know. I suppose you can. I've seen people do it.
Do you try?
I've seen people do it. I don't hate. I don't. I try not to hate. Like people have come on the show and said, like, "No, I know you hate Trump." I'm like, no, I just don't trust the cat. And yes, I just said cat. Daddy-O, can you dig it? Are you hep to that scene, Daddy-O? Okay. Yeah.
I think that's how we'll end. Thank you. It was really a pleasure to talk to you.
Nice talking to you too.
Thank you.
Anderson Cooper, everybody.